All right, so what I'm gonna do here is it's actually the same slide deck as we had on Monday for the introduction to drone applications, but I have a couple like extra takes on each one of these projects. And last year I actually did this at the first day of DroneCamp, and afterwards Brandon was like, you're going to scare people with that. We don't want to do that the day before we go fly, because you get out there, you're like, oh no, so many things can go wrong. And they can, but this is from years of flying and doing tons of projects. So it's a little bit, it has to be in its own context. Good. So I mentioned before, I'm not going to repeat too much of what I covered the other day. I might give a couple more details, but 48 projects all over the state that we've done in IGIS alone. We've had other collaborative projects, for example, with Becca. We're good? Is it not showing? Oh, I need to share the screen. Good. There we go. There. Excellent. Thanks for the heads up. That's what we have to have virtual moderators for. One click off and everyone's wondering what I'm pantomiming toward in the virtual audience. So again, so we've done 48 projects across the state, have had a lot of hard learning experiences. So we've learned the hard way, hopefully. So maybe you won't. And if one of the things that we cover saves you from doing the same thing that I would say did wrong, but could have prevented if we knew better at the time, then hopefully this whole entire drone camp, other than being fun and interesting, hopefully, is going to make it all worth the while for you. Oops, now I got to get back to the screen. There we go. So I mentioned we do a lot of project work for natural resources. These are some photos from a really neat desert campaign that Andy Lyons and I went out on. The kind of a side note, just fun story. We're out in the middle of the Mojave Desert and had to go through a whole rigmarole to get permitted to fly in the natural reserve there. And we're way out in the middle of nowhere. And a gentleman comes up to us and starts talking to us. And he was a researcher out there, and he says, I recognize your name. And he recognized Andy Lyons' name, and instantly Andy became a minor celebrity, because Andy wrote a animal tracking code that is used around the world. He actually developed it in Africa. This guy was using it for his dissertation. It just randomly is how it works. So yeah, again, yeah, Andy was suddenly a minor celebrity. On this exact project, our first major project covering about 3,500 acres. This was challenging because it was windy and it was hot. We had to turn the car on and leave the car running with the batteries next to the air conditioning to keep the batteries from exploding. I'll come back to another slide on that. But it was quite a significant project with tons of adjacent missions, so we could stitch this whole thing all together into one clean layer that we could then compare to telemetry data from desert tortoises. Similarly, done kind of hydrological modeling for washes within the Tacopa Valley of the Mojave Desert. But out there, we had some ravens that were chasing our drone down. And so we had to do all kinds of maneuvers to make sure that we stayed away from anywhere we thought there would be ravens, because they were trying to go after our Matrice 100. And I've had this happen one other time with birds of prey, that they sometimes will go after your drones. If you maneuver, sometimes the drone's fast enough, they won't chase it for very long, but yeah, you have to have that as a consideration. I've never had one crash, but I know of people that have. We've also done the post-fire recovery at the Hopland Research and Extension Center, which is a very tricky project to monitor because of the hilly terrain. It's very steep and hilly. And that causes crashes very easily. There's, I think it might have been, I'm not sure if it was Becca or Pat that mentioned the other day, having a compass in the field. I think it was Becca. And that's the cause of the crash. Or was that, I don't know if that was our drone or not. That was, no, we didn't have a picture of our drone. That's a placeholder. So one of our colleagues, who was a very good pilot, he got disoriented. He thought the mission was going to go that way, and it went that way into the hills behind us and crashed. It was tricky. So it's easy with the twisting, winding roads there. So the other one, landing with a fixed wing in these valleys that go like this. Up at the top, the wind was going this way. So we thought, okay, down next to us, if we land there, the wind's going to still be coming the same direction. Well, as it channeled around the hill, it turned direction, so it was a crosswind and pushed our drone into kind of a thick bush, almost a tree, and broke part of the side of it, which was strangely difficult to fix. Had to send it back. So topography, wind, key things. You don't want to land in a crosswind with a fixed wing ever. We've done some 3D modeling and classifications of forestry. I mentioned this the other day. The first time, actually, it was next door to the mission that I got this data from. It was right when I first started flying drones. I mean, really, one of the first times I ever went out. And I was on the property where you use the data for for the Pix4D and no, not the ArcGIS session. Oh yes, the stitching with ArcGIS also. The data sets came from my dad's ranch up in the hills. I have adjacent property, my brother does too. Well, my brother's pit bull was running around. I didn't think anything of it. I was flying. I was taking some pictures facing me, and the dog got really excited. It really wanted to eat that flying pinata. And so I was trying to figure out what to do with the drone. Where am I going to put it down where the dog couldn't get to it? And because I wasn't as experienced, I wasn't looking at the battery, and it ticked down until finally it was like almost dead. Like it was like 6% battery, could barely fly. And I managed to land it kind of hard in a corral where the dog at least couldn't get to it quick. So, and I was the only one there, so I couldn't grab the dog and do the controller. So it was interesting. So flying around animals in general, that could be a theme. You just want to consider these little things. Forestry and rangelands, and in this case, some post-fire work again. I showed the slide where we were using, and this is the same area up in Lassen County. There's the previous slide, looking at running transects more optimally, using the using the drone imagery rather than taking tons of notes, where you could do those notes back at your lab. Well, the thing with Lassen County is that it is really, parts of it are very high in altitude, and even I think this project was in June. A little interesting thing I didn't know about on the EB, it'll give you a warning if the barometric pressure starts changing really quickly. So I picked up the drone and it gave me a warning the barometric pressure is fluctuating. I'm like, it's fine out here. It isn't like we had tons of visibility, just regular clouds, but high. So I launched it, and it was about 3/4 of the way through the mission. And all of a sudden I felt a hail drop hit me. And I thought, what the heck? All right, I'm going to cancel the mission and come in, because I don't want to be flying it in inclement weather. I mean, this is fast. It came back, and it wasn't a long flight. Maybe it was on the ground in 5 minutes. By the time it landed, we were getting blasted by hail. I mean, really blasted, where I had to cover my ears up because it hit my ears so hard. It felt like it was like someone shooting it with a pellet gun. Could have cracked the top of the illumination sensor. It was really rough out there. So definitely know your weather of where you're going, because luckily we didn't crash anything or break anything, but it could have been a lot worse, especially if I wouldn't have said, let's go home right now. If it would have been flying in that, I don't know what could have happened. Agriculture. So we have, again, lots of agriculture projects. That makes sense. We're the Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. So these slides, one from our Lynn Cove Research and Extension Center, the other one from the Davis Foundation for Plant Services. Very similar project, structural analysis. And here's a image of our Lynn Cove Research Center where we've done a couple projects, published a couple as well. And I was over in this area somewhere here on a hot day flying. We were flying the whole thing. It's about 300 acres, flying the whole site with, I think it was an EB, so it's like multiple flights in a day, and really hot out. And like the desert, the Mojave Desert, we'd run the car and put the batteries on the, underneath the air conditioning. And of course, the car, the A&R car overheated badly. We had to shut it off. And I don't know, because of the heat also, then it wouldn't start. So we ended up getting locked within the facility when everybody left and had to call someone to get us out. And we get a jumper cable to get the car going. Fortunately, it was so long until someone came to let us out of the facility, because they locked the gates thinking, well, it was after hours, that fortunately the battery cooled down and we were able to get home. But that made for a long day. Yeah, that's good. That was not a picture of our car. I couldn't get one of them, but that was a good one. So let's see, zonal statistics. We still have got some good data off of some of these projects, including this one right here that was published. I got to be a co-author on this one, even though my part of the data, my part was not I wasn't as successful as I hoped to be, because we didn't find enough real variability in temperature between the different treatments of the ground. I later realized that was probably because of the time of the day that we conducted the flight. This was done a little bit later. But even still, I collected data for this project. And then on the way home, I didn't collect the data. My colleague, Robert Johnson, that couldn't be here this week, he collected data. He came to DroneCamp just the same week, right within a week. He went to the 2017 DroneCamp to help out. And on the way home, with all the data on his computer, he gave me the card, but with all the data on the computer, he was going back to the Fresno area and stopped at a gas station, walked inside to go to the restroom. Someone broke the window out of his car, took his computer with all the data from the project. It was a tricky kind of thing. We didn't want to disappoint the principal investigator on the project. They were really nice and generous, but they had a really tight time schedule because of the treatments. And so I got the card. I didn't know what happened. It had already been wiped off because we thought the data was good on Robert Johnson's computer. And fortunately, I was able to take the card with some help from Andy Lyons, who's a whiz at these sorts of things. We were able to find the deleted data on the card with a utility and get the data off and process it and fulfill the project that ended up getting published, which was nice. Not much more here. There's climate change research that we've done at the Desert Research and Extension Center down near Holtville, just north of Mexicali. That's a really neat site, looking at drought resistant type strategies for plants. I showed this the other day. And I forget who showed it, but someone showed the picture of the drone hanging in the power lines. Becca did. I got to get that from you because I couldn't find it. But this is the drone after they pulled it out of the tree and crashed it down onto the ground. So yeah, they were out of the tree, not out of the power lines. And it just happened to be one of those things that went up and caught on the power lines, and they're tall power lines. They're very tall. So it went up, got caught on the power lines, and they managed to get up there and knock it off with a pole, and then it fell down. And, yep, there we go. Couple last things that are kind of neat. Let's see if, oh, I have, what's that? Yes, I found these. Oops. I had to exit down so I can see them. I already preloaded them. So here, this is really fast video. This is San Diego right here. Jacob Flanagan, excellent pilot. He just finished bragging about how he never crashed a drone ever before. He's flown tons. And if you can watch, it goes up and down. So Chris Greer was there. For those that are virtual and you can't hear what he said, Chris Greer was there, and he was off to the left, and he has his own video of the crash and me going down into the bushes to retrieve it. And so that's that, yeah, that happens. If you fly long enough, you will crash. It doesn't, it's just, it will happen. You just got to be ready in case it happens. It's a malfunction. One of the rotors seized up on it. So the question was that his fault? No, it was completely mechanical. And we just test flew it to make sure that it was all up to date, and it just happened. So we actually repaired it fairly easily, and were able to continue using it for quite some time. Let's see, other slides really quick. There's not much to see here, but I'll play it anyways. The beginning is all that's interesting. If you look in the center of the screen, you'll see an EV coming in, and it doesn't come past the tree. I could replay that maybe just so if you didn't catch it. And there's us walking. So it comes in and it crashes right here. Little advice when you're coming in for a landing. We just thought we had to get over the trees, and then we had this nice grassy area out there that we could land on. The problem is the EV's elevation sensor or distance sensor on the bottom of it. If it detects something that's close, it'll think that's the ground, and if it's close enough to the ground on a landing run, it'll decide to land on it. It'll cut its engine and flare out and land. So it was on the top of the tree. I went to go ask someone at the facility for help, and we happened to have someone that was very skilled at tree climbing that scampered up there and got it by the time I got back. No, I didn't tell him to do it. I was like, I would have said definitely don't do that, but anyways. And last but not least, this is a little longer. I heard that no one showed your Brandon's famous drone fire video. You didn't get that, did you? Okay, this is interesting. Let me see if I can turn on the volume for this one. What's that? The video, the last videos. Well, yeah, I should close these, by the way. Even if hopefully the people online, we might have to look to see if they're getting video or the audio. I can explain what's happening for those of you in the room. We don't have to have it be that long. So you have the drones zooming around, boom, crashes right over there in the center. And you can see people going out there announcing, it looks like we have a fire, people bring in their drones. This is a drone race in Berkeley. Took them about, I forget, 10 seconds or so from the crash to get there. Someone right there is yelling OS. Like, and by the time they got to the drone, a fire had already started. They had good response, still 2.5 acres burned. Yeah. And you can see how fast everyone's running out. They're well equipped in case of this with fire extinguishers, you name it, water, buckets. You'll see someone running with a bucket in a moment. This is, see how fast? Yeah. I don't know what's in the building over there. Okay, here I'll let Pat repeat that.
Oh, I may not do this justice, but when I've heard Brandon tell the story, the building that is closest to where the fire is, the one that's in the background here, is houses an archive of library material and lots of data and important unreplaceable stuff. So it was at risk from the fire.
And one thing to remember on that video is that fire extinguishers do not work outside. Doesn't work.
So if you all heard that, fire extinguishers, chemical fire extinguishers especially, do not work on grass. What you have to spray with water in front of the fire line and wet the direction that it's going if you want to have any luck at all. And with that, let's turn this over to Pat. Oops. There we go. It's all yours, Pat, in here. I know, like you.
I'm a rambling guy. Okay. I got my amulet. A couple safety notes to follow on with what Sean was saying. In addition to the consideration about fire and fire extinguishers not working so well, another good thing to have besides water sprayers is a bucket of sand. Sand is very, very good, especially for LiPo battery fires. Water doesn't do a lot. If a battery is on fire, a lithium polymer battery is on fire, water doesn't do you much good. But covering it completely with sand, you want to deny it the fire oxygen is what you want to do, and water doesn't really do that. And then just to relate an anecdote, I believe it was in New Zealand in the last year or so, the news piece I saw. But if your drone ends up in power lines, think twice about trying to get it out yourself. The New Zealand Power Authority, I'm not sure what their version of PG&E or whatever it is, put out a public service announcement warning drone pilots and admonishing them from trying to take matters into their own hands. Apparently a pilot got his drone caught in a high tension wire, thought he knew how to get it down. He went and got a boom truck and had a bystander operate the boom truck for him to lift him up so he could retrieve the drone. And they both went to the hospital with third-degree burns and heart problems because they contacted the wires. I think the boom of the boom truck contacted the wires because they both got zapped, not just the guy who was in the bucket at the top. So don't play with power lines. They're dangerous. Okay, so when we talked yesterday, we thought that since SenseFly isn't here, and since this was a talk that or a portion of a session that was previously presented, then some of you guys said you were interested in fixed wing aircraft. So let's talk a little bit about them. So why fixed wing? Fixed wings take advantage of lift, right? If you have a wing shape, a foil shape, and you push it through the air, it develops lift and keeps something up in the air. Airplanes want to fly. That's why things can glide. Rotary wing aircraft like quadcopters, there's an old cliche or adage that helicopters don't actually fly, they just beat the air into submission. So they have to work very hard to do that. And so it uses up your batteries very fast to run enough motors with props big enough to keep your helicopter up in the air. Whereas a fixed wing aircraft, because it can glide, all it has to do is push it fast enough to take advantage of this lift thing. So it's much more efficient in terms of battery life and the amount of area you can cover. So why would you use a fixed wing aircraft? As I said, the pros are longer endurance. You can get more done per battery, per flight. They're also faster. They fly faster. That's a good thing for efficiency's sake, but it can be a problem depending on the sensor you're using and the altitude you're flying. So fast is good in terms of getting stuff done, but you can't go too fast for your imager. Many of them have larger payload capacity than some of the small rotary wings, and in some cases you can fly in slightly harsher conditions than a quad. Also, when they fail, they generally don't just plummet. They don't just drop right out of the sky because they can glide. A lot of the time they can recover from a failure in the air without being destroyed. But I'm going to qualify that in a second. The cons are that you need a lot more room to use these things. Unless you have a vertical takeoff and landing fixed wing, you need a little more room to take off and a lot more room to land, depending on how they land. Unless you have a vertical takeoff and landing, they can't do what a helicopter does, which is hover. So if you want to be able to do that, fixed wing is not your bird. And in the case of the EB and some other fixed wings, as Sean has said a few times, every landing is a semi-controlled crash landing. They belly land. They just skid along when they hit the ground. And so there's a certain amount of risk to that, and there's a certain amount of maintenance that has to be done regularly to fix the damage that happens every time. Of course, if you land them on nice soft grass and you're really careful, you're better off. But they do take a little bit of a beating every time they land. Flying them manually is a lot harder usually. Some fixed wings, you don't ever fly them manually. Some of them you do, but it's generally not as easy and intuitive as it is on a rotary wing. And the whole like let go of the sticks and nothing happens, not so much with a fixed wing. And also, this is not necessarily a minus, but usually often the ground control station that you use isn't something simple like a little tablet or a mobile device with a joystick. It's often going to be a laptop, and that has pluses and minuses. When it falls, it doesn't always get destroyed. Qualification that I made earlier. So this is our first fixed wing. It's an EB-RTK. Was the very first, one of the very first off-the-shelf aircrafts equipped with RTK. That's the RTK antenna right there. This was in 2014. We had it for a month, maybe. It was our initial test flights out at the Otter LZ, which is our sort of testing and calibration ground, which is all asphalt. It's all paved. So it was me and my boss. We were doing test flights all morning. They were going great. He said, I'm going to go get some burritos. There's the salsa that he brought back. I'm going to go get some burritos. I'll be back in a minute. He and his daughters went to the taqueria. And I said, I'm going to do one more flight while he's gone. And it took off. So it's all autonomous. You tell it what you want it to do. You give it the flight plan. You launch it, and it goes off and does its thing. So it went up to about 150 feet and did a nosedive and augered into the ground, just under full throttle, into the pavement. Wings broke off, nose broke open. You can see some of the guts right here. These electronic circuit boards that you're never supposed to see. So $50,000 drone destroyed in one flight. We talked to SenseFly, and this was like serial number 3 or something of this model. So they didn't have another one to give us as a loaner because we had a research project to do with this. We were getting ready to do. They gave us a non-RTK one that we could use, which meant we had to do a lot of GCPs, and we were kind of unhappy. But they did replace it completely with a brand new RTK unit when they had one. But there weren't many of them around at that point. So they don't always survive a crash. So again, this is kind of on the why, fixed versus rotary qualities of each. A rule of thumb can be that if you're going to do an area of interest that's more than a couple hundred hectares, that's 500 acres, then you definitely want to think fixed wing. That may be a good idea at a smaller area than that, but certainly when you get up to around 500 acres, it's going to take a long time with a rotary wing. You're going to use up lots of batteries because they move faster and can stay up longer. They're more efficient. Typically, though, the potential resolution, depending on the sensor you have on them, may not be quite as good. And because they fly faster, there's some limitations there. So different types of fixed wings. There's the sort of flying wing design, which is like the EB and this Firefly 6 Pro. That's the sort of fuselage shape. There's a few different kinds that are common for VTOL. Oh, I'm sorry. There's also the standard fuselage, which is this Trinity, which happens to be a VTOL, looks like a regular airplane, right? These kind of look like stealth bombers, the flying wing design, or like the bat plane. So then, in addition to regular standard fixed wings, we've got vertical takeoff and landings, and they come in a couple different flavors. There's the tilt rotor, the sort of convertiplane idea, where these rotors in this case and these rotors on the Trinity actually flip. They start off straight up, so you can take off straight up in the air, and then they become horizontal, so you can fly like an airplane. It's akin to the Osprey that the Marines use. I don't know if anybody knows about this. This design has been prone to a lot of accidents. There's been quite a number of fatalities around the Osprey. The tilt rotor drones work a little better. Then there's the tail sitters. So these guys, rather than having rotors that flip, they start off sitting on their tails and then take off straight up, and then are able to transition to horizontal flight. It's a kind of a neat idea. Very challenging if it's windy. You have to orient them so that they don't just get blown over. And then there's sort of a hybrid where they've got rotors going both directions, but they don't necessarily flip. So like the Delta Quad is one of those. There may be ancillary equipment to go along with them. RTK in some cases, if it's an RTK. The Trinity is a PPK capable aircraft. This Firefly can do PPK and RTK. I'm not sure about some of the other ones. Oh, EV comes in an RTK version. And PPK, yes. So to get the thing in the air, if it's not a VTOL, you got to give it some kind of a boost. You got to get it going somehow. And so that may be anything from like throwing it like a paper airplane to with the EB, you kind of hold it like this. This is from 2019 DroneCamp here. You pick it up and you'll see this later today. You shake it and that starts to prop up. Say, hey, wake up, and it starts spinning. And then you kind of take a step forward and fling it out in front of you like this. And it's almost impossible not to do this when you launch an EB. It's hard to do. So anyway, you let it go, and hopefully it doesn't come back at you, or it just goes off on its way. And hopefully it doesn't go straight up and come straight down. For larger aircraft, there are systems with catapults that may be like bungee driven or springs. And so as the aircraft get larger, they often need some kind of big apparatus to launch it. Landing then can be accomplished in a number of different ways. With the EB, these two diagrams are from the EB documentation. You tell the autonomous flight software the approach angle, the vector you want it to come in on. That's chosen based on the wind and everything, and also based on obstacles around you. So for the long long approach landing, SenseFly gives you kind of guidelines about how far out you need to worry about obstacles that are how tall, given the angle it's going to come in on. They also have a steep landing procedure for the EB, where instead of coming all the way in from altitude on a long trajectory, it kind of does this. It does like a spiral, and then it kind of goes out and comes in much steeper. That's good for tighter areas where you have more obstacles and less open space. But still, you need a good chunk of clear space. On ships, and in some other situations, sometimes people use nets. You just fly it right into the net, and hopefully it's robust enough to survive that. But this is where the VTOLs really shine, because you've got that landing pad that you took off from, and that's all you need. It'll come right back, especially with RTK, it'll come right back to that landing pad and just start to hover and come right down without any worry about obstacles around you or anything like that. Here's a novel, I think it has music, but hopefully we won't hear it. So here's an EB. You guys are gonna launch it. You couldn't see him, but he did this too. Now it's flying around. So I've done that once on the beach, on a really wide open beach, and I didn't do it like this. I caught it like this, but I don't have any documentation of it, so you'll have to take my word for it. And he didn't succeed every time either.
They're pretty good at landing in the right distance away from you, but not in sort of this sort of left or right. They're depending on gusts of wind or things like that. And so it's very hard to be in exactly the right spot when they're coming down.
Yeah, it's not a, that's why you need a lot of extra space, is that there's not a precise spot that it's going to end up in. It's, you've got to give it a pretty good wide open area, and it'll hopefully end up somewhere in there. But again, yeah, when I caught it, I was trying to do my best, you know, Jerry Rice or whatever, be a wide receiver, but I've only managed to do it once. So back to the VTOLs. We've already talked about the benefits of a fixed wing, and these guys are kind of the best of both worlds. These guys have the benefits of the fixed wing in terms of the efficiency and all those things, but not the downside of the fixed wing in terms of the takeoff and landing areas. There's a lot of examples, as I've mentioned, the one at the very top, the one that we have, in addition to the EB, the one at the top is no longer produced. I saw one on eBay today for about $3,000. They cost about $20,000 when they were new. But the company's out of business, and if you buy one, you're buying a dead system, but they work, and you can get them for pretty cheap. Most of these VTOL fixed wings are going to be over $10,000. They're not low-level, entry-level drones. They're for folks who have a little bit of money to spend, and that's almost always the aircraft only, no payload, no sensor at all. So just to sum it up, you can do more faster, and especially if you have a survey area that you have to launch far away from, and you have a long transit to get to it, fixed wings are good because they can get there faster. Obviously, you've got to be within visual line of sight no matter what with these guys as well, unless you have a waiver. And back to Sean's picture of the eagle, definitely I can say that birds, whether they're raptors or just seagulls, just sky rats, they react differently to fixed wings than they do to rotary wings. Some birds are more agitated or more threatened by a fixed wing because it looks more like a bird. The rotary wing, they're just like, oh, what the hell is that? But the fixed wing, they're like, oh, that's another bird. I need to be aggressive or I need to run away. But birds definitely sometimes will harass or at least make you worried that they're going to do something to your drone in the air, whether it's fixed or rotary. And with that, I will take any questions. Okay, no questions.
As a continuation of this, we will fly this afternoon, assuming that we can find a landing zone out there. So you will get a chance to see an EB launch. And yeah, I thought that was a great presentation. And for the virtual participants, that I will try to set up a camera out there, but I highly doubt the audio and probably the video won't be ideal. But we'll try to accommodate everyone as much as we can. Who knows? Maybe it'll look okay too. But with that, let's take a break until 11 o'clock. We'll get the next presentation going. And thank you so much.